All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of At Home with Mark. We are in season 2, which is exciting in and of itself, but we are more excited because today with episode 7, I have one of my favorite guitar players, Matt Schofield. Matt, thank you so much for being here and making some time in.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mark. It's nice to have a little window out into the world now and again these days, you know?
Yeah, man, I know. So we talked a little bit beforehand, so we'll get into some nerdy guitar stuff and whatnot. But as a precursor to all these interviews, I like talking about like the moment. I call it the moment. And I have a very specific moment in my life where music entered and has not left. So can you remember something like that in your life?
I would say it was more there was several key steps, so all probably as important as each other. Yeah, for me it was well, I already knew blues from just hearing it from my dad's records, and that being played. So I already liked it in a kind of casual way. But first of all, it was a video VHS cassette, in those days of B.B. King at Newcastle Town Hall. My dad had taped off UK TV, and I discovered this like 3 tracks. You can find it on YouTube. And just watching BB, I was just like completely mesmerized, fascinated. And so that was the first one. I'm like, how do you figure out what he's doing, And I had a little nylon string guitar before that, but that was only for the cowboy chords, G, D, that's all I knew. And then looking at BB playing around the neck, I'm like, okay, what's going on there? So I'm like 11 years old there, really. And then, so there was that. And the next one then was seeing BB sitting in with Stevie Ray Vaughan's band with Albert Collins as well at New Orleans Jazz Festival 1988. I've talked about this one many times. You can find that on YouTube. They play Texas Flood. Stevie brings BB out. So I was a BB fan. I'd heard one track of Stevie's. I'm like, what's going on? And then Albert Collins. And so I saw this video. So it was a couple of weeks before Stevie died, actually, that I saw this recording. And that was it. When I saw the 3 of them playing together, I was like, I'm starting a band. And within a month, I started a band at school. So that would be there was the BB took me to the BB with Stevie and Albert Collins. And there was one other thing that I've realized. It's funny, over the years, you kind of, those big ones you remember like that. But there was other little things. I had a copy of, this is before I played, of Ry Cooder's Get Rhythm album. And he does All Shook Up on that record. And the intro is the stinkiest, nastiest guitar tone. All fuzzed out like some little amp, and he's cranking it. And I should just rewind that intro over and over and over again. And just going, I want to make a sound like that. So that was probably my first time where I was fascinated by the tone of a guitar as much as the playing. It was like, what's that distorted sound? And that wasn't something you were hearing that much in pop music at that point, late 80s. Maybe Mark Knopfler, Money for Nothing was the other kind of like nasty guitar sound that you were hearing sort of mainstream, but it was all very synthy back then, if you think about it. So that one really stood out as well. But more than that BB video, it's funny, it was videos as well, really, that then brought me back to the records,
That is, I mean, dude, I'm 41. I remember VHS, man.
Yeah, that was there was something. I guess that's and I was cassettes then as well, So then I taped all my dad's blues records onto cassette,
Yeah, dude, I remember my neighbor had a copy of, like, an original copy of Sgt. Pepper, and let me borrow it. And I'm like in the 6th grade, dude. I'm not a responsible young lad. But I remember I brought it home. My sister had a turntable and it had a dual tape deck. So I taped Sgt. Pepper on the tape. So I mean, I'm all in on that stuff, man. I remember it. Yeah. So how old were you? So like the first time you heard BB, I mean, are you like, 5, 6? Like, how old are you at that time?
Probably, yeah. I mean, my dad would have been playing it. But I guess I really start to come online with it probably around 10 years old, you know, where it really clicks into this is what I want to listen to. So I remember, my dad had moved to California by then. So I remember my first trip out there in the summer. This before the year before I was playing, so it would have been like 89 or something like that. Listening to the BB King record, There Is Always One More Time, which was a new album that had come out then. I remember having that on, listening on a Walkman, you know. So yeah, that's listening to BB, but before I was playing, you know, and then seeing this video, I was just fascinated. I remember in my 10 or 11-year-old brain, it was like, how's he playing up here on the guitar? You know, because my experience with guitar had been, the open chords till then, you know. So
how did you get into like the pentatonics then? Like, how did you figure that stuff out?
I accidentally discovered it. My mum had a like best of the 60s compilation on cassette, and it had Voodoo Child on it by Jimmy. And I also had a copy of Stevie doing Voodoo Child. That was the first Stevie Ray Vaughan I ever heard at all, actually, was just him doing Voodoo Child from Live Alive. So I had that, and I had Hendrix, and I was sat with my little nylon string guitar trying to figure out the intro by ear. And I'll show you this one. I think I'm plugged in all right. Let me see.
Oh, nice.
Is that all right volume-wise there?
Yeah, you can hear a little bit.
We can... So it's... So I was going... like in the wrong octave, you know, and and in the wrong position. But my, you know, new fresh ear still figuring out how this works, and I figured that out, and then I probably must have accidentally tuned my guitar to E flat as well to play. You know, I mean, like how you even I can't imagine what it sounded like, but somehow it was coming together, and then I realized, oh, so those notes sound like things that I was like, oh, so this sounds like BB King, like. And that was my first blues lick. And from then I was like, oh, so then you can play those notes.
Yeah.
And off we went. That's the best explanation I can give. It was just by accident, you know, but it sounded like what everybody else was using as well. So yeah, funny, isn't it, man? It's there was I say this every time I talk about this, but you know, there was no YouTube or iTunes or Spotify, or I had the records that I had on cassette and a couple of VHS bits of footage of people, and that was it. Got to figure it out.
People wonder why there's tape warble on those things, man. It's because we kept rewinding them.
Exactly what I did. Just rewind over and over and over. And then, you know, I'd buy guitar magazines and stuff and read that, and you know. But I remember by the time I discovered, I don't read music, so by the time I discovered like Tab, which was that was in guitar magazines, much less than it is now, but there was always that section at the back. But by then it was like once I'd figured out the pentatonic, it was easier to work by ear, you know. And so that was it. And then also like learning songs to play in my band, and this is something I've realized over the years was incredibly important to me, was that I started a band immediately. I mean, I was playing every hour I could in my bedroom, but more than that, I was playing every hour I could with the guys in the band, you know. And it was a high school band. We were all starting together, you know, secondary school, as we call it in the UK. But we, you know, so it was like I'm playing guitar, and a friend of mine, Chris, is like, I'll play bass. Another friend, Franz, is like, I'll play drums, and another friend, Rob, I play a bit of, you know. So we're 13 years old, but we did a gig within a few months, and so it's always been in that context of learning. So you learn together. We learn songs because we wanted to play them. So it's almost like, or I was never even aware of learning, if you know, it was just what we did every day. So
I know what you mean.
Fully absorbed by it, and in a lot of ways, that's just what's carried on for 30 years now. So.
Man, and God bless Chris for being willing to pick up the bass, because not a lot of your friends are willing to do the bass thing.
Exactly.
Oh man, it's a weird time, like when you're putting a band together, because ultimately, like, there's no bass player. Like, most kids don't like gravitate towards like, I want to play bass guitar. You know?
I will say, Chris, it was the perfect personality for it, and so he took to it great. He was that steady, solid kind of dude, you know, just
nice.
Not interested in being out front or showing off. He just was interested in putting down a solid bass line. So quite hard to find, though, like you say. So.
Good on you, Chris.
Yeah.
So Tom is asking, like, in your childhood, listening to popular music, like what was on the radio, and like what was like more kind of, I don't want to say top 40, but contemporary stuff that was kind of lighting your fire.
I remember really liking Sledgehammer, Peter Gabriel, when that came out. That's before I'm playing, if you know what I mean. What's that, 86 or something? So I'm 9, but that one I really like. But before that, something I realized, I've mentioned occasionally, there was a British artist called Shakin' Stevens, which probably people outside of the UK aren't that familiar with. He was very much in like an Elvis-y kind of mold, and so this is like 82, 83. And he was my favorite as a little kid. I mean, when I'm like 4, 5, 6 years old. And I realized years later it's all swung. Most of his tunes are shuffles. Basically, it's like 80s redone 50s rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my first sort of favorite pop star as a kid. And you're like, well, there's obviously something to it. All the tunes are swung, shuffles, and old school rock and roll, but in the 80s. So I'm obviously drawn to that groove somehow innately, because it's still my favorite, you know. Swinging, and I like music that swung, you know.
I was gonna say, Matt, it sounds like you were always an old soul, because like do you know what I mean? I mean that as a compliment, because I grew up on the Seattle music, and that made me go into like heavier music before I found funky, soulful stuff. And I feel like funk and soul and blues and even like hip hop. Like, one of my favorite artists, I don't know if you're hip to Mike Doty. You know that about that guy?
I don't know. No.
Mike Doty in the 90s was part of a band called Soul Coughing.
Okay, I'm familiar with those guys, yeah.
So, but like all their stuff is like basically hip hop grooves.
Right.
With like, you know, kind of rock and roll. So that stuff kind of like turns me on. So it's like, but it took me a while to understand that the groove oriented stuff is really what was doing it for me. But for you to have that stuff in you when you're 5 or 6 years old.
Well, I didn't realize at the time, but now when I think about it, that before I really knew explicitly what blues was, my favorite stuff was all shuffles and old school rock and roll grooves. That was, and you know, the rhythmic side of things has always been and continues to be, it's so important to me. So I've always been drawn to stuff. It's why I don't mean this is a slight in any way on British blues, but it was why I was never a huge British blues follower, because the feel was different than the stuff that I was already hearing, you know, like particularly in the rhythm sections. So once you're listening to BB's band swinging on Paying the Cost to Be the Boss or something, then I was never really drawn to that British rhythm section feel, you know, because it wasn't swinging quite as hard as the American blues bands, you know. So that was, there's just my preference for how something feels, you know. So I think hearing the original guy, I mean, I knew who Muddy Waters was from being a kid. I knew who Freddie King was, you know. From way back. So, well, I think once that's in you, even subconsciously, as it would have been to start with, just the sound that I heard around, then it's hard to shake it off, that groove, you know.
Oh yeah, I love stuff that swings super hard, so I get it. It's a feeling it gives you, man. It's definitely, and when you're playing with a drummer who really can swing and shuffle, man, I could play for an hour over that groove.
That's pretty much what we try to do. So,
So, For records, like, I
Yeah.
want to talk about, like, so we've talked about BB, you know, we talked about Stevie. Is there an album? I've been asking people this lately because it's very interesting to me. And it doesn't have to be like your top album of all time, but is there a record that you wish you could erase from your memory and go back and listen to for the first time?
Oh wow, yeah. What to hear it like you've never heard? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think probably. I think probably something by Stevie because it had that effect, you know, where, as I say, I was familiar with a lot of blues artists, but for many of us of my generation, he just put a point on the whole thing and just went, there you go, this is it, right? So yeah, maybe to hear that Voodoo Child, it was a cassette tape, and I had Journeyman by Eric Clapton on one side, which had come out around that 89 or whatever. But my dad had sent it over to me, posted a cassette. And on side B, he put just that Voodoo Child from Live Alive. And so, you know, Eric's album finishes, and then there's that intro of Steve, you know, listen to that version, just he's really, you know, freaking out on the intro. That's the one where I'm just like, what? Okay, Eric Clapton sounded nice, but what is going on here? To have never heard that before like that. And it did have that immediate impact. Whereas other people, let's say the first time I heard Robin Ford, it changed my entire perception of what you could play within the context of a blues. But it was in a different way than that slap. It wasn't a slap in the face like Stevie was. So it would be something like that to answer your question. Yeah.
No, that's great. What do you think it is about Stevie and like us guitar players in the generation we're in? Do you think it's coming from, since he's kind of this, I would maybe put him in the second or third generation of blues players, because if you go back to like Magic Sam and like the
of electric blues, he'd be broadly in the third generation. Buddy Guy and Magic Sam would be second generation, I suppose. But then Stevie, of course, incorporates the British guys as well. So he's coming of age with Clapton and Jeff Beck and stuff like that, and obviously Hendrix. So it's third to fourth generation, I suppose. A lot of guitarists all born around that time. 54 was Stevie, and there's a lot of pivotal players are born in a window there. And then there's a lot of us that are born in a window in the late 70s, you know. So, there's though they have, you know, we all have players that have that impact. But for me, Stevie just had a way of putting it all together that made it very both attractive and somewhat accessible, actually. So he had this balance of seeming like you'd never seen anybody play guitar like this before. It was just so connected to him, you know. So where he, you know, as my dad said at the time to me, he doesn't play the guitar, he is the guitar. So there's something very attractive about how connected he is with it. And yet there's something that also makes you feel like you want to have a go at it yourself. So it's not overwhelmingly or unapproachable, you know. And that was really important for me because I'd been studying BB, and it was much harder for me to get a handle on what BB was doing than what Stevie was doing.
How so?
Strangely enough, BB's not. It's not as. I mean, Stevie has very definite licks that you can grab hold of. You can learn a Stevie lick and practice it and get it down, you know. But BB, yes, he's got licks, but it's more of his playing is quite sophisticated, actually. So he's making the changes a lot more, even though it might seem simple. There's some it's just coming from a different place, and it was hard. It's harder to play like Jimmy Vaughan than Stevie. If you actually sit down and try and play along with them both, because it's that kind of vocal style versus Stevie's incredible rhythmic style. I mean, Stevie was it was about his, you know, his pace and his dead on sort of delivery, right? It's a delivery. And And whereas a lot of the older players or more old style players is more of that conversational style, and you need maybe a little bit more of a hear it and play it type way of playing. Stevie's more, I don't even want to say it, but there's a mechanical nature to Stevie's playing that's not a criticism. It's just dead on that you can, all the it's a technical thing, isn't it? Not to say that he was incredibly soulful player, but he was able to wrap that up into a technical thing, which I think is actually what made it more achievable to some degree for the rest of us. There's something to grab hold of. So it was so hard to find something to grab hold of BB, because people are like, oh, it's just one note. Well, is it? Because it's a lot more than one note, and to just well, that's quite hard to this the whole thing in my first True Fire course. I talk about simple is not easy. Do you know you know what I mean? And that's something that I've been fascinated by as I've got older and played more of and traveled, and you have, especially the comparison often I find myself having is to food, and great food that you might have around the world. And invariably the most memorable and spectacular meals I've had have been the simplest, but I couldn't make them at home, so it might be just one slice of Wagyu beef in Japan, and it's like there's nothing to it, but it's the most incredible because of all the things that have come to make that experience so special. Or having real pizza or pasta in Italy, there's no takeout pizza you can get that's even close to it here, and it's just the bread with a few splodges of mozzarella, very little bit of tomato, so that's it. Just there's not like masses of toppings going on and all that stuff. It's so simple, a real Italian pizza, and so great and it's so. What's going on with that? That you can make so much out of so little. So that's BB King, really. And at the same time, I also have stuff of him absolutely shredding that I've shared online occasionally that people don't even know about with BB, just running, because his heroes were Charlie Christian and Django Reinhardt, amongst more bluesy heroes that he had, T-Bone and Blind Lemon Jefferson and Booker White and stuff. So people don't even know about that side of his playing, but BB could peel his way around some diminished lines and stuff that you'd be surprised. He just didn't all the time. So.
What I find interesting about that, what we were just talking about too with simplicity, is I think the reason a lot of people struggle with it is the patience,
right?
Because as guitarists, like it's like bigger, better, faster, more kind of thing, like what we were talking about in the beginning. Like, how did you work on that? And that kind of relates. There was a question in here about, when you get on stage, the adrenaline starts pumping, and how do you like hold yourself back? Like when you're in a situation, like I'm going to share that the solo of you playing with Josh Smith and Tomo and Eric Gales, and
sure,
because I want people to see this, because it's a complete demonstration. That's what I love about your playing, is like you have this level of patience of creating a story. Like a solo should always be a story. You should be telling the audience or communicating, whether it's with the band or the audience. Like you're not just spraying people with 16th notes. You're actually like curating a story. Like how did you start to do that? And like at what point in your playing were you like aware of it even?
Yeah. I mean, it's because what I want it to sound like. Basically, I mean, I'm trying to please my ear. I'm trying to excite myself, or the journey includes me. I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes, and that's first thing that I'm going to start mentioning when I speak to people, to create awareness, because I think so. I'm digressing here for a second, but I'm an improviser, so like I have a vocabulary, and you can find different you can find repeated phrases and concepts and ideas, but it's essentially every time I take a solo, it's a pretty blank canvas that I will use my vocabulary on. And I really want to start stressing that, because I think that's in the world of Instagram and all that stuff. People do 100 takes of 1 minute of something that they've been practicing and learning, and then put it out to the world. Which is fine. I'm not criticizing, but that is absolutely not what I do. So somebody asked me how many takes I do for my True Fire courses, right? When I do the performance bit and then they transcribe it, and and I'm like, takes? Everything's a take. I mean, if I do it again, it's because I'm trying to express the concept more, but I stand by any solo that I've ever played. I stand by it 100%. There are no takes. Everything's a take when you're an improviser. Do you know what I mean? So the perspective for social media's shifted the perspective on what kind of player I am, but I play live with a band for real human beings, which is we can't do at the moment, So why was I saying that? What was the question, Mark?
Just about like the patience that you have and you display on stage.
Okay, so because it's improvised, you have to be in the moment and center yourself, and it's your entire body, it's you breathe, you have to breathe in with the music. You have to be part of the music. I am not playing the guitar that's in front of me. That my focus is not like, and then hit this and put my focus is inside me, and the music is inside me, feeling the length of the bar or the rhythm to its fullest. It's hard to explain. I recommend the Steve Jordan Drum Tuition DVD because it's just about music and rhythm rather than learning to play drums.
Oh, I have it.
Yeah, it's great. You talk about the length of a quarter note in that, and how when we're used to hearing perhaps a quarter note or a beat 2 and 4 defined by the hit of a snare drum, which is where it's being put, but there is a length of time after that is also part of that note until the next one starts. So it's not just the attack, the transient. There's a length to notes, and you can divide up rhythms further and deeper into them. So I'm trying to sort of exist in the gaps, in the spaces between the rhythm that's being played, and weave my way through that and feel. So it's all about, centering yourself, for want of a better term, and being there, but being in the moment. That's the hardest thing about being off being able to not do gigs at the moment, is there's no replacement for the emotional and mental place that I've spent my life trying to be further into when I play music. There's no outlet for that at the moment, and that's been hard, and it's increasingly hard as this goes on. I can't playing here, sat at home, playing tracks, working on stuff on the computer. It's not the same. It's so I desperately miss that mentally and emotionally, because it's somewhere that I've spent 30 years of my life trying to inhabit as deeply as possible, So it's about almost like completely submitting to the music, and just being in the moment, being open to it, and then allowing yourself to walk with it or something.
It's almost like you're chasing the muse in the moment.
Every time. And I am trying to please myself, first of all, be it with the tone or the direction of the solo, or I'm trying to amuse myself, actually. So I don't know really where I'm heading. I know I can't even imagine, as I've said a lot of times, I'm not even very good at all at playing the same thing over and over. And the longer I've played the way I do, the harder it is to do that. My ability to just perform a piece of music that's in a set fashion is almost zero. I just have to play what comes out.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. But it's a bad time to be that kind of artist at the moment. But we'll get back there. So.
Yeah, we'll get back, man. I think that's really cool because it's the whole thing about amusing yourself and keeping yourself happy, because that translates to the audience, man. Like,
exactly. That's always been my basic theory, is if it sounds pretty good to me, and I think I have a pretty good ear, then hopefully some other people will catch on to the vibe that's happening, and it does. And you know, the some of the most rewarding things is when I end up playing a gig to people who don't know who I am, and perhaps aren't even specifically into blues or guitar playing, and they come up and say, "Man, I just was completely enthralled," or whatever way they describe it. But I was really enjoyed hearing you play, you know, and that I'm able to take someone on some kind of journey that isn't a guitar nerd, you know. So that's because that's you're reaching someone with some art there, aren't you? You know.
oh yeah, and then if you have a smile on your face and you're having fun, people in the audience can see that, man. That makes a big difference. Like, that was the one thing that always used to bug me about going to see Derek Trucks play. I love Derek so much, but homeboy never has a smile on his face.
He's pretty stoic, isn't he? Yeah.
He's so deadpan.
Yeah.
And part of that is like, you know, that's the mystique of Derek, I guess, in a way. Like, I'm like, dude, are you enjoying yourself? Like, but I know he is, but it's so funny to watch him play.
I think that was a rather genius move on his part to assemble a 14-piece band, you know, because it puts a lot of energy around him that allows him to just be that lean, mean solo machine that he is, you know, without having to jump around or, you know, it takes some of the visual element off him, and there's so much going on with that band, you know. So yeah, smart move, you know.
Yeah, I had his keyboard player Gabe Dixon on a couple of weeks back.
Okay, cool.
And I asked him about like what it's like being on that stage, because it's so many musicians, and he was like, dude, you have it sounds so immense. Like, it's just so cool to be on that stage.
I've done a fair few shows with him over the years, so I've stood right there, you know. It's
yeah, I'm sure it's loud as hell.
Oh yeah. Well, and you know what? It's incredible. I've done a fair few shows with two drummers, two entire full drum sets, and in a small room. I've done it a few times, and it's amazing. But it's so loud, two drummers playing at once. I mean, it's like having two bands playing at once, essentially, in terms of volume. So yeah.
Let's talk about I want to talk about gear really quick, because so obviously, so you're a T-Rock guy.
Yeah.
That was my midlife crisis purchase a couple years ago.
Okay.
And I just bought a Studio Signature. I'd always wanted a T-Rock amp for a long time. But I love that freaking thing. But like, what was your first guitar rig?
My first guitar rig, let me see. Well, my first guitar rig was the 3/4 size nylon string that I'd had since primary school, that I didn't really get going on. That when I decided I wanted to try and figure out what BB was doing, I went and got that out. So I spent my first year of practicing on a nylon string, and I cut it. It didn't have a cutout. It was just a student one. So I cut a cheese wedge out of the lower bout on it. Terrible idea, but I was 11 or 12, and I thought I needed to get up here, you know. So
yeah, man.
So I did that. So my first couple of gigs I did on the school guitar from the school music room, which was so I was gigging before I had an electric guitar. That's how important it was to for us to be playing, you know. It's like borrow anything. So I played a Marlin Sidewinder Strat copy, and I don't remember where I got it. Maybe it was even my uncle's or something. It's this Laney solid state. It was a keyboard at combo amp, but it was like a 1x12 solid state Laney with a 12-inch speaker in it, and that was my first amp. So and I bought a Crybaby and a TS10
Nice.
which is what they were still making them at that time. So I bought a TS10 brand new from the local guitar shop. So that was my first rig. Then I had my first real one is we found a used Strat in California. So I'm about 14 now, maybe something. It's 91, I think, basically for my 14th birthday. And it was a US standard Strat that had been cut for a Floyd Rose and a bridge humbucker.
Oh,
but I didn't know, so it was a real Fender. So that was, and it was used and it was there. That was the real Fender. And then I played that one for years until I think maybe then I got another. I found it in another used store in California, and it was another US standard body with a Warmoth Telecaster neck on it, and EMG pickups with the mid boost. And so then I really liked that neck, and it had 6100s in this like nice flame. It might have even been an ebony board. It's probably kicking around somewhere. Maybe it's in my mum's garage or something. And then I played that one, and so same Tube Screamer, and I didn't get any kind of other pedal until 2001 maybe, and I got a Menatone Red Snapper. And then I've had this guitar 20 years and a month now, my 61 Strat, and by then I'd got a Super Reverb in about 98. I shipped it back from San Francisco to London. It took about 3 months on a boat, slow boat from China. It really was, because it goes that way round,
Wow.
And so I still got that 64 Super. So then as a pro, gigging in Europe at the time in London, and I had the 61 Strat and 64 Super Reverb, and that's it, and a Menatone Red Snapper. So I have never had loads. I have the most guitars I have now, but for 10 years, that was it. Gear was never like the goal, obviously I had one really, really good guitar and one really, really good amp and a couple of George L's cables and a Menatone Red Snapper instead of the Tube Screamer. That was the boutique upgrade, and that was it. That was fine. Made my first couple of records with one guitar and one amp. So.
Man, do you still have that TS10?
Yeah, I think I messed it up at some point trying to open it up or something. It's probably in a box in my mum's attic in Manchester somewhere. So there's a few things that are kicking around up there. I found when I was back at her place a few years ago, I found a Captain Coconut pedal. I don't know whether you've ever heard of them. It's
what is that?
Made by a company called Fox Rocks, a very early boutique pedal.
Oh yeah, I know Fox Rocks.
Hang on, I can reach it right there. This thing.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's fuzz, univibe, and octave.
Oh man,
I bought that at LA Guitar Center in 2001, I think. So that's early boutique 2001. Dave Fox, the guy, he's still going. He makes a few different things, Fox Rocks. But I need to send it to him for service. Actually, it's a bit noisy now. But that was like a big deal to buy one other pedal, and so that's 20 years.
Man, gear was, I guess, growing up in the 90s and stuff, like you said, like there wasn't that many companies. I mean, it was Boss, Ibanez, like, yeah. I mean, it wasn't that.
Buy a Wawa, Crybaby, or Vox.
There wasn't options. I'm like right now I always talk about how I feel like we're in the platinum era of gear because there's so many options.
But there's a lot of noise that comes with that. So I just wasn't thinking. Obviously I searched and I wanted to have an old Strat that I loved, and I wanted to have a Blackface Super Reverb. But those two achievements of focusing my desire and attaining those items, I'm fine. I could do a gig today just still on those and sound just like me. In fact, sometimes I do. So.
Yeah, I don't think there's. You could probably plug into a PV amp and it's gonna sound like you. You know what I mean? It's not.
I've had to plug into a fair few crappy things on tours over the years where it's been a flying gig, and it's been rough for me, but not to the point that so many people would notice. tone is as much about your idea of it and achieving that than it is the gear. Do you know? I mean, it's you have to have an idea of the sound that you want to get in your mind. The gear won't give it to you. So then when you have that, you can sort of pull that out of almost anything to a degree. It might have different, tonal flavor or nuance or something, but essentially, I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make. It's impossible to separate a tone from playing. If you think about like so let's talk Stevie Ray. He's very well known for his tone, but how do you do like this? So the El Macambo gig, phenomenal sound of an old Strat through a tube screamer into a couple of old Fenders, right? That's it. How do you separate the tone though of that from his playing? Like, to me, they're not. That's not what you're actually hearing. Is an amazing guitarist playing through nice things, but but not a lot of stuff. Even the concept to me to separate it from the player, that somehow you can just take that stuff, is very odd to me, to think that it's gear that you're hearing great guitar playing, because I've had people sitting on my rig and they can clear the room, man, pretty quick, because they don't have it's like, because you have to, especially if you play really loud with the high headroom amp and clean, you have to finesse it, and I think that's a myth about Stevie, that he was really heavy player. He was certainly very confident in the way he struck the guitar, but he didn't maul it, and at least until he threw it on the floor and stood on it later on. But actually, he's not mashing on the guitar. The guitar is resonating and all that stuff. It's it's impossible to separate tone from the playing that you're hearing, because at the end of the day, crappy playing through great gear sounds crappy. It's so end of discussion there.
Yeah. What's the biggest nightmare of backline amp that you rolled into that you're like, oh no?
Yeah, I'm trying to. There's been so many over the years, not just on my gigs when I was touring with other bands in Europe, and that it's hard to remember one specific. I mean, when I've had like blown speakers, bust reverb, just maybe things that have been running on, like a twin with 3 blown power tubes, so it just sounds like a can of bees, or you're like, there's no headroom here. It's but I've had unimaginably bad gear. I mean, obviously, quite often I'd had jazz choruses and things like that, but it's I gotta say, I just remembered my first tube amp before I got the Super Reverb. I had one before that. It was a 1977 100-watt Super Lead Marshall.
Dang.
And, that was my first tube amp. That was loud, so it sounded great, And funnily enough, I bought it from Simon Law, who is SVL Guitars, when he worked in the music shop in Swindon in the UK. So so I just remembered that was a good amp. I shouldn't have sold it. It was four input, last of the 4 input Super Leads. And
man, that's that. I always chase that tone, that Wind Cries Mary. Like if when I'm getting set up on a gig, like I will get my amp to the point where the cleans are that Wind Cries Mary thing. If I can get there, I know it's going to be an okay night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, well, let me play. I want to see if I can play some of this solo, because this man.
Oh God, I have to listen to myself in that.
Just for a minute. Let me see here. Get this. Click on that. All right. So, I think I can go to this little side screen. Oh yeah, that's good. Can you guys see that? Can you see that?
I can see it.
All right. So this is one of my favorites, because of how the band reacts to you, because they're like, these are all great players, so they all have big ears, obviously. But check this out. This is so fun to watch. Oh, my bad. Right there. That's so great. It's such a great touch, man.
I don't think I've ever heard this. All the old favorites.
And the groove right now, man. That's got to be so fun to play over with this band.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the whole experience with everybody there and stuff. Can't really go wrong with that stage full of people in any way, shape, or form.
Man, anyway, I don't want to embarrass you more, but it's
fine.
So great. Like that's got to be one of my most favorite videos of you.
Well,
like
thank you.
In terms of just, you know, because there's, for me as an improviser, and I came to improvisation through like jam bands, like
right,
because I have an older brother who's into the Dead, and that's how I got into it. But just how you approach getting to a 4-chord or a 5-chord, like you and like Mike Landau are some of my favorite cats, because you guys approach getting to those changes so beautifully and like effortlessly. It's just, how do you, like, when you're playing, I know we were talking about chasing the muse and everything, but like something that I've always struggled with is like how to make the 5-chord change fun.
Yeah, right.
Because if you're doing a couple choruses or whatever, like that, because there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with that 5-chord, but like,
sure,
what do you do when you're prepping to kind of like step it up? Because that whole solo was great, because like the dynamics of it grew and grew and grew.
Yeah.
And you know, and you went up the neck, so like it built and built and built, because you're telling a story, you know.
Yeah. So trying to, and you know, by bringing the band down, first of all, you're trying to give yourself somewhere to go, because I don't remember exactly, but either before me, some other monster, one of the best players in the world, whichever one it was on stage, had just soloed before me, right? So it's like, okay, so let's take a breath for me to have a chance to, you know, set something fresh up, but also for the audience, because they've probably just listened to Eric Gales or Josh Smith or Tomo solo right before that, you know. So it's like, all right, we need to reset the counter here, and then we'll go again, and otherwise it just becomes a din. So that's mainly my concern, and that would apply to then each change in the progression. Really, is I'm trying to make myself feel like I feel when I listen to my favorite players, because there's a visceral reaction for me. So that's really what I'm thinking about. I'm not really thinking about, let's drop this thing here on this chord, or, you know, it's really tension. Well, first, tension and release is the main thing, right? Of trying to feel something and then get there with it, you know. It's so much more about that to me than the technical aspect of it. But I'm trying to please my ear, so I'm trying to reach for the notes. So yes, 5-chord is the ultimate point of resolution, really, is getting to the 5 and then back to the 1 and back to the top of the verse. So that, you know, there's a lot of tensions to work with within the 5-chord, and you know, it was a big realization to me that if you're playing on blues changes, dominant 7th chords, and that let's say you're in A, as I think we were there, to play the 5-chord is only one note different in the pentatonic than the A, you know. So I'm not explaining that very well. It's far too early to be doing that. Not after noon. But just to give a quick, so your A blues scale, and then to the 5, your E pentatonic is only one. You're only changing the C to a B, and so it's mostly the same notes to play the change, right? So then what are you going to do? Well, it's like I want to bring out the maximum E-ness of the E, if that's I want to make it the most E. So so it's like, well, they're the same notes, but I really am thinking of them in the sound of E. Even though my finger's in the same place as it was playing in A. So that would be a quick explanation. I'm trying to bring out maximum flavor from the given notes that we have to work with. So that's kind of the way I see it, more than like a super like theoretical thing. I'm not really spending my time there, unless you're like, hey, I'll drop some kind of cool diminished thing or something like that. But that there might be a bit more conscious thought going into it. But other than that, I'm just trying to make it feel good.
Yeah, it's funny at the anytime I hear Mike Landau do like a whole tone thing or 5 chord or whatever, I'm like, that's so genius. It's like him and like John Schofield and like that are using those concepts, but not. I don't feel like nerdy intentional. Like they're not pushing their glasses up and being like, I'm gonna do this. It just feels right at the time.
It's always musical. I mean, and that's the thing. You should be making musical decisions rather than technical decisions. And for me, trying to drop your latest lick that you've been working on is a road to ruin. Because then I'm not in the moment, and then what am I doing here? I'm not being fair with myself, or not even recognizing my own strength there. To not be in the moment is to not do what I do as well as I can, because the thing that makes me who I am and makes the people that do enjoy my playing, one of the reasons that they enjoy it is because that's the place that it comes from. Whether they're conscious of that or not, it stood me in good stead to this point to approach my music with that mindset. So to break that, I'm only doing a disservice to myself, if you know what I mean. And I remember when I was younger, you've learned something. You're especially starting to discover guys like Robin and John Schofield, and with some more outside sounds, and trying to crowbar them in. So you're playing a nice solo, and then you're like, okay, now I can do one of those half whole runs from the 1 to the 4. And I went through my phase of attempting those kind of things, and occasionally one will show itself to me these days, and I'll do it, but only if it shows itself to me. I'm not like, okay, second verse, 4th bar, drop in a half whole. That is not what I'm going for or doing at all. So it's still just what makes it feel good, what makes it sound good.
That's what I like about your playing, man. It's very genuine. Like,
I hope so. Thank you.
And I think most people that listen to you would agree that is part of the draw to listening to you play. And I would also say your vibrato is so great. Like that's what makes you so soulful too. Did you so when you started playing in like organ trios and stuff, and you had to, cover some ground sonically, what was the draw to play with organ trios in the beginning? Because I love organ trio stuff like Soul Live and like old Jimmy Smith stuff and whatnot.
Yeah, Soul Live were a big influence on us, and actually I've just been talking to Alan Evans this past few weeks about doing something. I played on a track with him recently, and so we might go up to a studio in Massachusetts for something. Just I'm digressing again. I
love Al. I had Al on my show last season, man. I love that dude.
So my being a fan of that goes way back. It really comes from Johnny Henderson is really the only guy I've done organ trio with. We went to school together, and we grew up in the same town in the UK. So I didn't really know him that well at school. I was best friends with his older brother, who's a guitar player as well. So Johnny was getting more into that, you know, and Johnny had been touring with bands that I was in, and, you know, we had a little thing together before it was my band, if you know what I mean. And so I knew he was getting into doing the left-hand bass thing. And yeah, so first of all, I was never that much of a fan of playing in power trio. You know, I've actually had to do it more in the last probably 5 years than I did for many years before that. Because I don't have to. Really, I want to be B.B. King with horns and a big band, so I can just go meow now and again. You know, like that's what I'd really like to do. And so playing power trio, I was never a huge fan of it. So I always loved the B3. And then when Johnny started getting into playing the bass on it, I was like, this could be a thing for me to have a band with. Really, it was because it was different, and I didn't want to be a white kid with a Strat, because there was a lot of those around 20 years ago, you know. Still is.
Yep.
I wanted to have something that seemed more unique. So we started just doing little gigs. So really the organ trio was the thing that was the beginning of me having my own band, rather than mainly playing in other people's bands. So I don't know which came first, if you know what I mean, which was the cause and factor, you know. But it just felt good. It swings and it was different. And I thought, I naively thought being different on the blues scene would be a good thing, because all my heroes all sounded completely individual. What I didn't realize is that people were like, why don't you get a real bass player? That's too jazzy. It's not blues. I was like, wow, okay, so much for being unique. And I'm like, by the way, have you ever listened to Albert King, B.B. King, or Jimmy Vaughan? All have played with organ trios over the years, but no, they haven't. So people don't know. They're happy to tell you about it, that they think they know. Yeah. So yeah, it was. We heard a lot of that, a lot of like so jazzy. And why are you playing? You know, because to us, we don't. Who cares? Do a shuffle, do a meters tune, do a soul life tune. You know, we were 24. You know, so I feel like kids. You know, it's like who cares, man? Yeah. So it was just great, and me and Johnny were also big fans of. I mean, the Robin Ford stuff I like is the Blue Line period. That's with Tom Breckline and Roscoe Beck. So we were kind of like, wouldn't it be cool to have a band like that, where it was very open to playing, you know, being able to jam, but with an organ trio instead, you know. So that was part of it as well. And of course, when the bass player's also able to play the harmony, you can really jam. And so we just go off on the tangent and do. I mean, we've never had any fixed arrangements when we play with the organ trio with Johnny and Evan Jenkins. It's always been, hey, whatever happens is good.
Yeah. There's fewer things in this world that are more pleasing than listening to a B3. Like,
oh man, yeah.
It's like, I love gospel music, and just hearing that kind of in the context of some rock and roll, and like just gospel changes and stuff are so soulful. It's like, how can you not be moved listening to that music? Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, regardless, I mean, I'm not really a religious dude, but like listening to a B3 is a religious experience for me. Yeah. You know, it's like in the context of a great band, and like there's nothing that beats it, man.
Yeah, and Johnny, of course, carries his around religiously. There's only a couple of guys that I have worked with. Another wonderful player from Massachusetts that works with Alan quite a lot, Darby Wolf. He's been playing with me on and off recently, when we could play. Now it's crazy that's even a year. It's a year in next week since I did any gigs with my own band. But Darby carries the real thing around as well, and Johnny carries the real thing around, which is a lot to carry the real B3.
You're gonna get a workout on that.
No, there's nothing you do. Yeah, there's nothing like it. It's an interesting beast because it obviously isn't a fully electric instrument, but it has the same qualities as an acoustic instrument in its tonality somehow. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's really something, man.
Yeah,
and
man.
So I'm, you'll always find me with a B3 where I can.
I'm down. I'm fully in, man. Anytime it happens, I'm in. All right, man. You ready to do some lightning round Get Town as we wrap this up?
Hit me, yeah.
All right, Matt. So here's the drill. So we got a 105 BPM just to raise some suspense, right? So these questions are just, you can fire off answers if you want, or you can explain your answer, whatever you'd like to do. I'm open. I'm all on board with you.
Gotcha.
The first question is always the same, my friend. Lennon or McCartney?
Oh, I'm not a big. I don't have enough knowledge of either of them, to be honest. Lennon.
All right. Super reverb or deluxe?
Super.
Diminished or whole tone?
Diminished. Blackjack
or poker?
Don't have enough knowledge of either of them. Poker. I don't know.
That's a good. Audi or Lexus?
Audi.
Camping or posh hotel?
Posh hotel.
Me too, man. Hot tub or swimming pool?
Swimming pool.
In-ears or floor wedge?
Floor wedge and raging amplifier, yes. With behind, yeah.
Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones?
Well, Lord of the Rings, really, yeah. I guess, yeah.
All right, and this is the last one. Sometimes this is the easiest, sometimes it's the hardest. This is a would you rather question. Would you rather have to wear a bib every time you go out to eat, or have to drink from a sippy cup every time you're at the bar?
I go sippy cup. We even have sippy cups here to take to the condo.
Nice. Awesome. Well, you made it through. Congratulations. You are unscathed.
Thank you.
Safely. There you are. Matt, thanks so much, man. What a good time hanging talking to you.
Thank you, Mark. My pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody that hung out. This will live on my channel in perpetuity. I'll send you the link if you want to share it around, Matt, after this is
I will. I'll put it on
over.
For the stragglers to catch up on. So.
Lovely. And then next week, man, and you probably, I don't know if you have any of this cat's pedals, but Jesse Davey from Kingtone's going to be on next Wednesday.
Never heard.
Oh,
that's my go-to when I want Tube Screamer. That's the go-to. And oops, I got a set. I'm dropping the screws away. That's a set of Jesse's pickups that I've been meaning to put in for a couple of weeks that he sent me. So.
Oh man, you gotta let me know. I've been kind of thinking about that. You gotta let me know. I have an old Strat, Shoreline Gold Strat I bought in the late '90s, and they have Texas specials in them. But like, I've been thinking about putting Jesse's in there. Yeah,
I got them last month, and they got lost in the post for ages and ages, and they finally showed up. And so I've just been too lazy to. It's an undertaking for me to pull a guard off and solder and all that stuff. So I'm really excited to try them, but then Christmas and some other things got in the way. So that's no reflection on my excitement to hear them. So.
Cool. All right, y'all. We'll see you next time. Stay safe. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Have a good day.
All right. Cheers, Mac.